The great chamber was bigger than any building humans had ever seen. Crystal walls stretched up so high they seemed to touch the stars themselves. Light came from everywhere and nowhere, making the whole place glow like the inside of a diamond. Sarah Chen stood in the center of it all, feeling very small and very alone. Around her, thousands of alien beings watched from floating platforms. Some looked like walking trees with too many eyes. Others were made of living metal that shifted and changed. There were creatures of pure energy, beings that looked like giant insects, and things so strange that Sarah's mind could barely understand what she was seeing. She was the only human in the room. The only human in the entire Galactic Council space station. The only human who would speak for all of humanity today. The trial had been going on for 3 days. Sarah had listened to witness after witness talk about humanity's crimes. The charges seemed endless. Humans expanded too fast across the galaxy. They fought too hard when attacked. They asked too many questions. They changed too much too quickly. Most of all, they refused to obey. The Vorthak Prime Speaker floated above them all, a being of pure light that hurt to look at directly. When it spoke, the words appeared in Sarah's mind rather than her ears. The translation was perfect but cold. The evidence has been presented, the Prime Speaker said. The Council will now vote on the fate of humanity. Sarah watched as the votes appeared on the great display above her head. Numbers in alien scripts that her translator slowly turned into something she could understand. 847 votes for exile, only 3 votes against. Her heart sank like a stone. The species known as humanity has been found guilty of excessive aggression, dangerous unpredictability, and refusal to accept proper guidance, the Prime Speaker announced. The sentence is immediate exile to the Dark Rim sectors. All trade, communication, and travel between human space and Council territories is permanently forbidden. Sarah felt her legs go weak. She had known this was coming, but hearing it made it real. 200 human colonies scattered across dozens of star systems would be cut off from the rest of the galaxy forever. No trade, no communication, no help. She forced herself to stand straight. With respect, Prime Speaker, this sentence is a death warrant for my people. The Dark Rim is full of raiders and pirates. Without access to Council trade routes and technology, many of our colonies will not survive. The Prime Speaker's light pulsed once. That is regrettable but necessary. Humanity has proven itself unable to live peacefully within galactic civilization. This Council has maintained order for over 50,000 years. We will not allow one species to destroy what we have built. An alien that looked like a giant centipede raised several of its arms. Councillor Withex of the Cleith Dominion, Sarah realized with disgust. The Cleith were raiders who attacked outer colonies, but somehow they got to sit on the Council while humans were being exiled. The humans are warriors by nature. Withex clicked through his translator. They fight when they should negotiate. They take when they should ask permission. They are a danger to the peace we have worked so hard to maintain. Sarah's anger flared. We fight when we're attacked. Your people have raided 15 human colonies in the past 5 years alone. We've only defended ourselves. You defended too well, another voice said. This came from Councillor Dreeks of the Altani Collective. You destroyed 3 Cleith raiding fleets completely. Such violence is not the way of civilized beings. So we should have let them burn our cities? Kill our families? Sarah's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. You should have brought your complaints to this Council, the Prime Speaker said. We would have handled the matter through proper diplomatic channels. Sarah almost laughed. She had brought complaints to the Council. Dozens of them. Each time she was told to be patient, to understand that the Cleith had cultural needs that must be respected, to find ways to accommodate raiders who wanted to steal and kill. How long would that have taken? She asked. Your diplomatic processes move at the speed of glaciers. How many human lives were we supposed to sacrifice while waiting for you to act? As many as necessary to maintain order, Councillor Ithex replied. His mandibles clicked, and what Sarah's translator told her was amusement. The vote was already final, but the Council seemed to enjoy explaining why humanity deserved exile. Speaker after speaker rose to list human crimes. They had colonized too many worlds too quickly. They had developed new technologies without asking permission first. They had rejected offers to limit their population growth. Most damning of all, they had refused to accept Council oversight of their military forces. Humans are chaos, declared Councillor Vix of the Serene Republic. They change constantly. They adapt. They refuse to accept that the old ways are the best ways, In 50,000 years of peace, we have learned that progress is dangerous. Humanity threatens everything we have accomplished. Sarah looked around the chamber at all the alien faces watching her. Some seemed sad about the sentence. Others looked satisfied. Many just seemed bored, as if this was just another day of business for them. "You call this peace," she said quietly. "But it's not peace. It's stagnation. You've built a galaxy where nothing ever changes, nothing ever grows, nothing ever gets better. You're so afraid of chaos that you've forgotten how to live." The Prime Speaker's light pulsed red. "You prove our point with every word. Humanity cannot accept the wisdom of their elders. You are children playing with weapons too dangerous for you to understand." "Maybe we are children," Sarah agreed. "But children grow up. Children learn. Children become something more than what they were. When was the last time any of your people did something new? When did you last solve a problem instead of just managing it forever?" "Silence," the Prime Speaker commanded. "The sentence has been passed. Enforcement fleets are already moving to establish the blockade. Humanity will be escorted to the Dark Rim immediately. Any attempt to return to Council space will be met with force." Sarah felt the weight of failure crushing down on her. She had been sent here to save her people, and she had failed completely. In a few hours, human space would be cut off from the galaxy forever. Ships carrying food, medicine, and technology would be turned away. Colonies that depended on trade would start dying within months. But as she looked around the chamber one last time, Sarah felt something else growing inside her anger. These aliens thought exile was a death sentence. They expected humanity to fade away quietly in the Dark Rim. Another problem solved by banishment. They didn't understand humans at all. "You think you're sending us away to die?" she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "You think cutting us off from your precious trade routes and technologies will break us? You're wrong." She turned slowly, making eye contact with as many aliens as she could. "Humans don't break. We bend and we adapt and we survive. You're not sending us to our deaths. You're setting us free from your rules, your limits, your fear of change." The Prime Speaker's light flared brighter. "Remove her from this chamber." As security beings moved toward her, Sarah spoke one last time. "When we meet again, it won't be as exiles begging for mercy. Remember that you chose this. Remember that you made us your enemies." The last thing she saw before being escorted away was Counselor Rythex's mandibles clicking in what she now knew was laughter. The Cleath Raider thought humanity's exile was funny. Sarah made a mental note of that. Someday she thought they would see who was laughing. 25 years had passed since the Galactic Council cast humanity into the Dark Rim like unwanted garbage. Those years had been hard. Harder than anyone had imagined they could be. Marcus Rodriguez floated in the observation deck of the Titan yards, watching the skeleton of humanity's newest ship take shape in the void. The construction site orbited New Geneva, a world that hadn't existed when humans were exiled. Now it was home to 15 million people and the largest shipyard humanity had ever built. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" Chief Engineer Lisa Park joined him at the window. 2 kilometers long, armor plating that could stop a meteor and enough firepower to level a small moon. Marcus nodded. The ship below them looked nothing like the graceful vessels humans had built before exile. Those ships had been designed for Council space, built to Council standards, limited by Council rules about what weapons were acceptable and what technologies were too dangerous. This ship was different. "It was built for war. Hard to believe we used to build cargo haulers and passenger liners," Marcus said. "Peaceful ships for a peaceful galaxy." Lisa laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Peaceful, right. Tell that to the families on Harvest Colony." Marcus remembered Harvest Colony. Everyone did. It had been one of the first settlements to fall after the exile. The Cleath Raiders had come in force expecting easy prey. They had found a farming world with minimal defenses and a population that still believed in council justice. The Raiders had burned everything. Every building, every crop, every person. When the rescue ships finally arrived, there was nothing left but ash and the twisted remains of farm equipment. 50,000 people dead because they had believed civilization would protect them. That was when humanity learned their first lesson of exile. They were alone in the dark, and nothing was coming to save them. "The Cleath taught us well," Marcus said quietly. "They showed us what we needed to become." The early years had been chaos. Human colonies scattered across the Dark Rim had suddenly found themselves cut off from everything. No supply ships from Earth, no medical supplies from the core worlds, no military protection from the Council fleet. The raiders had come like wolves smelling blood. Cleith, Zhek, Ravager clans, and a dozen other predator species that had been held in check by council presence. They had all descended on human space at once, expecting easy pickings from a species famous for being soft traders and diplomats. The first raids had been disasters for humanity. Colonies burned, ships were captured or destroyed. Hundreds of thousands died in those early months while humans tried to fight with merchant vessels and mining equipment, but humans learned fast. They always had. The change began on Ironhold, a mining world that had been hit 3 times by different raider groups. The colonists there had finally said enough. They stripped the mining lasers off their equipment and mounted them on cargo haulers. When the next raid came, the haulers had torn the raider ships apart. Word spread. Other colonies began improvising. Farmers turned their crop dusters into fighter craft. Scientists started developing better weapons in basement laboratories. Engineers began designing ships that prioritized survival over beauty. Most importantly, the scattered human colonies began working together in ways they never had before. Remember when New Tokyo and Brisbane Station hated each other? Lisa asked, watching a supply convoy dock with the station. All those corporate feuds and territorial disputes? Hard to hate your neighbor when aliens are trying to kill you both, Marcus replied. The Exile had done something the Council could never have imagined. It had united humanity under a single purpose: survival. Old national boundaries meant nothing when Earth was cut off behind an alien blockade. Corporate rivalries seemed stupid when everyone faced the same enemy. The Terran Federation had formed naturally, born from necessity rather than politics. Every human colony had joined voluntarily because they all understood the same truth. Together they might survive, but alone they would certainly die, and they had done more than survive. They had thrived. Status report on the new drive systems, Marcus said, pulling up a holographic display. Better than we hoped, Lisa replied, manipulating the data with practiced gestures. The fusion plasma hybrid is running at 94% efficiency. We're getting twice the thrust of the old antimatter engines, and we can build them with materials we mine ourselves. Before Exile, humans had depended on the Council for advanced technology. Antimatter came from massive processing stations in Council space. Navigation computers used Council star charts and algorithms. Even basic medical supplies had come from alien manufacturers. Being cut off had forced humanity to innovate or die. They had chosen innovation with a vengeance that would have terrified their former judges. Human scientists, freed from Council restrictions on dangerous research, had made breakthrough after breakthrough. The fusion plasma drives were just the beginning. New alloys that were stronger than anything the Council used. AI systems that could calculate jump routes through uncharted space. Weapons that hit harder and faster than anything the galaxy had seen. The Council thought cutting us off from their technology would cripple us, Marcus said. Instead, it forced us to build something better. A new ship appeared on the tactical display, dropping out of hyperspace near the shipyard. Marcus recognized the configuration immediately. A hunter-killer, one of humanity's newest designs. It was smaller than the dreadnought under construction, but deadly in ways that would have shocked the peaceful Council. Captain Vasquez reporting successful patrol, the COMM system announced. No hostile contacts in the Kepler sector. All shipping lanes secure, Marcus smiled. 18 months ago, the Kepler sector had been controlled by a Cleith raiding fleet. They had demanded tribute from human ships and attacked anyone who refused to pay. Now their ships were scrap metal floating in the void, and their bases were human outposts. The hunters had become the hunted. How many raider groups are left in our space? Marcus asked. None of any significance, Lisa replied, checking her reports. The Zhek pulled back to Council space last month. The Ravager clans haven't been seen in 6 months. The Cleith Dominion is down to maybe a dozen ships, and they're running scared. It had taken 20 years, but humanity had cleaned house. The Dark Rim, once a haven for pirates and raiders, was now patrolled by human fleets that showed no mercy to predators. Ships that had terrorized the outer galaxy for centuries now fled at the first sign of human vessels. The Exile was supposed to contain us, Marcus said, watching another construction crew begin work on a new ship frame. Keep us trapped in the Dark Rim while the Council maintained their perfect order. Seems to be working, Lisa said with a grin. We're definitely contained. The question is what happens when we decide we don't want to be contained anymore. Marcus looked out at the growing fleet. Hundreds of ships under construction or already completed. Crews that had been fighting and winning battles for 2 decades. Colonies that produced everything humanity needed without depending on anyone else. The Council had created their own worst nightmare. They had taken a species known for being adaptable and aggressive, given them a common enemy, and forced them to become completely self-sufficient. They had turned traders and diplomats into warriors and conquerors. The blockade is still holding, Marcus said. Council enforcement fleets still turn back any human ship that tries to enter their space. For now, Lisa agreed. But those fleets were designed to stop the humans they exiled 25 years ago. Merchant ships and passenger liners. They're not prepared for what we've become. A priority message appeared on Marcus's personal display. He read it quickly, then read it again to make sure he understood correctly. Problem? Lisa asked, noticing his expression. Intelligence report from our deep space scouts, Marcus said slowly. They found something interesting. A backdoor route to Council space that doesn't go through any of the blockaded jump points. Lisa's eyes widened. How long would it take to get a fleet through? According to this, about 6 months with the new drive systems. The route goes through the galactic void, following dark matter streams that the Council has never bothered to map. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the shipyard continue its work. Both of them understood what this meant. The prison the Council had built around humanity wasn't as secure as they thought. The Council thinks they're safe behind their blockades. Marcus said finally. They think exile solved their human problem forever. Are we going to tell them they're wrong? Lisa asked. Marcus smiled, and it wasn't a nice expression. Eventually. But not yet. We're not quite ready for that conversation. He looked out at the fleet one more time. Soon, he thought. Very soon the galaxy would learn what exile had taught humanity. They would discover what happened when you took a species known for conquering the impossible and gave them 25 years to prepare for war. The Council had wanted to get rid of their human problem. Instead, they had created something much worse, a human solution. The Cleath command ship Devourer hung in space like a metal predator, its scarred hull telling the story of 1,000 successful raids. Commander Zethix stood on the bridge, his forearms spread wide as he studied the tactical display. 3 human cargo ships had been detected entering the system, fat with supplies and completely unescorted. Easy prey, he clicked to his crew. The humans still haven't learned to protect their ships properly. We'll take their cargo and sell them to the slave markets. The Council worlds pay well for human specimens. The Devourer and its escort ships moved in for the attack. Zethix had been raiding human settlements for 25 years, ever since the exile began. Humans were soft, weak creatures who preferred talking to fighting. They made excellent slaves and even better victims. As the Cleath ships approached the cargo vessels, Zethix noticed something odd. The human ships weren't running. They weren't calling for help. They were just sitting there waiting. Commander, his sensor operator called out. I'm detecting some kind of energy buildup from the cargo ships. Weapons? Zethix asked, but he wasn't worried. Human cargo ships had light defensive systems at best. Nothing that could threaten a Cleath raider. Unknown configuration, the operator replied. I've never seen anything like... The first human ship vanished. One moment it was there on the sensors, a fat cargo hauler drifting helplessly in space. The next moment it was gone as if it had never existed at all. Where did it go? Zethix demanded. I don't know, Commander. It just disappeared from all sensors. The second human ship vanished. Then the third. Zethix stared at empty space where 3 ships had been moments before. His crew began clicking nervously, their mandibles chattering with fear. Cloaking technology, Zethix realized. But humans don't have cloaking technology. The Council banned such research decades ago. That was when the first railgun slug hit his ship. The Devourer's shields collapsed instantly. The projectile punched through the hull like it was made of paper, venting atmosphere and sparks into the void. Emergency klaxons began wailing throughout the ship. Return fire, Zethix screamed. All weapons open fire. But his gunners had nothing to shoot at. The human ships remained invisible, striking from the darkness like ghosts. More slugs slammed into the Devourer, each one precisely targeted at critical systems. Weapons arrays exploded. Engine compartments vented plasma. Life support systems went offline. Then the cargo ships reappeared, and Zethix finally understood what he was looking at. They weren't cargo ships. The hulls were designed to look like merchant vessels, but underneath that disguise was something from a nightmare. sleek black armor that seemed to absorb light itself, weapons that fired projectiles at speeds that made them impossible to track, systems that had technology the Cleith had never seen before. Human warships, Sethix whispered. But how? Humans don't build warships. They're merchants and farmers. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the TFS Retribution, watching the Cleith command ship burn on her main screen. Her ship had been disguised as a grain hauler, complete with fake cargo manifests and civilian transponder codes. The Cleith had taken the bait perfectly. "Target their engines," she ordered her weapons officer. "I want them alive for questioning." "Yes, ma'am." Firing. Another railgun slug punched into the Devourer's drive section, and the massive raider ship went dead in space. Around it, the rest of the Cleith fleet was suffering the same fate. Ships that had terrorized the outer systems for decades were being torn apart by weapons they couldn't see coming. "This is for Harvest Colony," Elena said quietly. "This is for New Shanghai. This is for every human family you murdered while the Council looked the other way." The battle was over in minutes. Of the 12 Cleith ships that had entered the system, only the command ship survived, and it was barely functional. The rest were expanding clouds of debris and frozen atmosphere. Elena activated the comm system. "Cleith vessel, this is Captain Vasquez of the Terran Federation Navy. Your ship is disabled and your fleet is destroyed. Prepare to be boarded." The response came in broken standard, thick with clicks and hisses. This impossible. "Humans, not warriors. Humans weak." Council said humans weak. "The Council was wrong about a lot of things," Elena replied, "but they were right about one thing. We are dangerous." The boarding action was swift and professional. Human Marines in powered armor cut through the Devourer's hull and captured the surviving crew with minimal casualties. They had done this dozens of times before, and it showed. Elena walked through the captured command bridge, studying the alien equipment with interest. 25 years ago, this ship would have been completely beyond human ability to counter. Now it seemed primitive, cobbled together from outdated technology and scavenged parts. "How many human settlements has this ship attacked?" she asked the captured commander. Sethix's mandibles clicked weakly. He was wounded and in shock, unable to understand how his pride and joy had been reduced to scrap by creatures he considered prey animals. "Many," he admitted. "Dozens, hundreds, easy hunting." "Not anymore," Elena said. "The hunting season is over. The destruction of the Cleith raiding fleet was just the beginning." Across human space, similar operations were taking place. Ships that had preyed on human colonies for decades found themselves facing enemies they couldn't understand or counter. The Zhek Consortium lost 3 entire raiding flotillas in a single week. Their ships simply vanished from patrolled trade routes, found weeks later as drifting hulks with their crews either dead or missing. The Ravager clans attempted a massive assault on the new Byzantium system, bringing 40 ships to overwhelm the local defenses. They ran into a human battle group that had been waiting for them. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with every Ravager ship either destroyed or captured. Admiral Harrison Wells reviewed the battle reports from his flagship, the TFS Nemesis. The war against the Raiders was going better than anyone had dared hope. Human fleets were winning every engagement, sometimes without taking any casualties at all. "It's almost unfair," his chief of staff commented. "They're still fighting with technology and tactics from 50 years ago. They have no idea what we've become." Wells nodded. The Raiders had grown fat and lazy during the years of human exile. They had become used to easy prey. Merchant ships with minimal weapons, colonies with outdated defenses, cargo haulers that couldn't fight back. They had never faced purpose-built warships crewed by people who had spent 25 years learning how to kill efficiently. "Status report on the Cleith Dominion," Wells requested. "Effectively finished, sir. Our intelligence estimates they have fewer than 20 ships left, scattered across their territory. Most of their leadership is either dead or captured. The Zhek pulled back to Council space last month. They're requesting protection from the Galactic Council." Wells almost smiled at that. The Raiders, who had spent decades attacking human colonies, were now running to the Council for protection from humans. The irony was perfect. The Ravagers? Still fighting, but only in small groups. They've abandoned their major bases and gone into hiding. And the others? Dead, fled, or surrendering. "Sir, within 6 months, the entire Dark Rim will be under human control. We've eliminated every major raider group that's operated in this region for the past century." Wells stood at the observation window, looking out at the fleet assembled around his flagship. Hundreds of ships built to human specifications, crewed by people who had learned warfare the hard way. Each vessel was a masterpiece of efficient destruction, designed by minds that had been freed from Council restrictions on military technology. "The Council created this," he said to his staff. "They exiled us to the Dark Rim because we were too aggressive, too warlike. Then they left us here with every raider and pirate in the galaxy to teach us exactly how aggressive we could become." A communication alert sounded on his personal display. Wells read the message quickly, then read it again to make sure he understood. "Sir?" his chief of staff asked, noticing his expression. "Priority message from Fleet Intelligence," Wells said slowly. "Our deep space reconnaissance units have completed their survey of the void routes. We now have multiple pathways to Council space that bypass their blockade entirely." The bridge fell silent. Every officer understood what this meant. For 25 years, the Council's blockade had been the only thing keeping human fleets trapped in the Dark Rim. If that blockade could be bypassed, how long until we could move a significant force through those routes? Wells asked. "The first ships could be in Council space within 6 months, sir. A full battle fleet could follow within a year." Wells looked out at his fleet again. Ships that had been forged in the fires of constant warfare, crewed by people who had learned to see every alien as a potential enemy. The Council had wanted to contain humanity in the Dark Rim. Instead, they had created the most dangerous military force the galaxy had seen in millennia. "The Council thinks they solved their human problem," Wells said quietly. "They think exile broke us, scattered us, made us irrelevant." He turned to face his staff, and his expression was not kind. "I think it's time we corrected that misunderstanding." Across human space, other fleet commanders were receiving similar intelligence reports. Ships began moving toward assembly points near the void routes. Counselor Threeks of the Altani Collective was reviewing trade reports when his aide burst through the chamber doors with news that would change everything. "Sir," the young Altani gasped, his metallic skin flickering with distress patterns. "Emergency communication from the Kepler Nexus. They're under attack." Threeks looked up from his display, confused. The Kepler Nexus was one of the most secure installations in Council space. A massive trading hub where 5 major hyperspace routes converged, protected by automated defense platforms that had never been defeated in 3,000 years of operation. "Pirates?" he asked. "The Jek, perhaps?" "No, sir," the aide replied, his voice shaking. "It's the humans." The datapad slipped from Threeks' hands and clattered to the floor. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Couldn't think. The humans were exiled to the Dark Rim, cut off from Council space by blockades that had held for 25 years. How could they possibly be attacking the Kepler Nexus? "That's impossible," he said finally. "The humans are contained. The blockade is still in place, sir, but the humans didn't come through any of the monitored jump points. They appeared out of the galactic void using routes we didn't know existed." Threeks felt his blood turn cold. If the humans had found ways around the blockade, if they could strike deep into Council space without warning. "How many ships?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. The Nexus stopped transmitting 12 minutes ago." General Harrison. Wells stood on the bridge of his flagship as human Marines secured the final section of the Kepler Nexus. The battle had lasted exactly 47 minutes from first contact to complete surrender. The station's ancient defense systems, designed to repel raiders and pirates, had been overwhelmed by tactics and weapons they had never been programmed to counter. "Casualties?" Wells asked his Marine commander. "Minimal, sir. 3 wounded, none seriously. The station's security forces surrendered after we took the Central Command Center." Wells nodded with satisfaction. The capture of the Kepler Nexus was just the beginning. Across the border between human space and the Council territories, 47 other operations were taking place simultaneously. Space stations, mining facilities, military outposts, and trade hubs were all falling to human forces with clockwork precision. This wasn't a raid, it was a conquest. "Open a channel to the Galactic Council," Wells ordered. "Tell them that humanity would like to renegotiate the terms of our exile." The response from the Council came 6 hours later, in the form of the largest fleet mobilization in galactic history. Ancient ships that had served as ceremonial guardians for millennia suddenly found themselves pressed into active service. Species that hadn't fought a real war in centuries began dusting off old battle plans and obsolete tactics. Admiral Cathara, of the Serene Republic, stood on the bridge of her flagship, the eternal peace as the massive Council fleet assembled around her. Over 3,000 ships from dozens of species, the largest military force ever gathered in the galaxy's recorded history. We outnumber them 50 to 1, her tactical officer reported. Intelligence suggests the humans have at most 60 ships in council space. Kythera nodded, but she felt uneasy. The humans had appeared out of nowhere, struck with impossible precision and captured installations that should have been impregnable. That didn't sound like the work of a desperate species making a last stand. Begin the advance, she ordered. All ships maintain formation and proceed to the Kepler system. The council fleet was magnificent to behold. Ships of crystalline beauty that sparkled like jewels in the starlight. Vessels of living metal that flowed like liquid art through space. Ancient dreadnoughts whose very presence spoke of power and authority accumulated over millennia. They were also completely unprepared for what they were about to face. The first human ship appeared on their sensors just as the council fleet reached the outer edge of the Kepler system. A single vessel, barely a fifth the size of Kythera's flagship. Her tactical officer laughed when he saw it. One ship? They're going to fight us with one ship? Kythera was about to respond when the human vessel fired. The projectile that struck the eternal peace moved so fast it was invisible to both sensors and the naked eye. One moment the flagship's shields were at full strength. The next moment they were gone, along with half the ship's forward section. Emergency klaxons blared throughout the fleet as more human ships appeared from nowhere, their black hulls emerging from stealth like nightmares made real. They moved differently than council vessels, with quick, aggressive maneuvers that spoke of crews trained for actual combat rather than ceremonial displays. Return fire, Kythera screamed as her ship shuddered under another impact. All ships, open fire! The council fleet responded with every weapon they had. Energy beams that could slice asteroids in half lanced out toward the human ships. Missile volleys that could devastate entire fleets screamed through space. Exotic weapons that manipulated gravity and time itself reached out to destroy the attackers. Almost all of them missed. The human ships moved like nothing the council had ever seen. They twisted and turned through space with impossible agility, their advanced drives allowing maneuvers that would have torn older vessels apart. When the council weapons did hit, they struck armor that absorbed energy like a black hole and deflected projectiles like they were toys. How? Kythera whispered as she watched another council ship explode under human fire. How are they doing this? Captain Elena Vasquez smiled grimly as her ship, the TFS Retribution, tore through the council formation like a shark among minnows. Around her, the rest of the human fleet was performing with the deadly efficiency of predators who had spent decades perfecting their craft. Target their command ship, she ordered her weapons officer. Time to send a message. The Eternal Peace tried to flee as human ships converged on it from all directions. Its ancient engines, designed for stately progress through peaceful space, could not match the speed of vessels built for war. Railgun slugs punched through its beautiful crystalline hull like bullets through glass. Admiral Kythera's last transmission was a single word: impossible. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, the once mighty council fleet was reduced to scattered debris and a handful of surrendering vessels. The humans had lost exactly 4 ships, and even those had been damaged rather than destroyed. Wells received the battle report while reviewing intelligence from the other fronts. Every human operation had succeeded beyond their wildest projections. Council forces, trained for ceremony and intimidation rather than actual warfare, had crumbled under the assault of enemies who had learned their craft fighting for survival. The council is requesting an immediate ceasefire, his communications officer reported. I'm sure they are, Wells replied. Tell them we'll consider their request after they've formally acknowledged our sovereignty over the captured systems. Within hours, similar messages were arriving from across the front lines. The council that had exiled humanity with such confidence was now begging for mercy from the species they had dismissed as dangerous but primitive. The irony was not lost on Wells. For 50,000 years, the council had maintained order through the threat of overwhelming force. They had never actually had to use that force because their reputation alone was enough to keep troublesome species in line. But reputation meant nothing against an enemy that had already been sentenced to the worst punishment the council could imagine. You couldn't threaten exile against people who had already been exiled. You couldn't intimidate with military action against a species that had spent 25 years learning how to fight. Status report on our advance forces. Wells requested. All objectives secured. Sir, we now control every major trade hub and military installation within 50 light years of the border. Council forces are in full retreat. Resistance? Minimal. Most Council ships surrender immediately when they encounter our forces. Their crews have never experienced actual combat before. Wells looked out at the wreckage of the Council fleet drifting through space around him. Beautiful ships that had been built as symbols of peace and prosperity, now reduced to twisted metal and frozen atmosphere. The Council had created this destruction with their own choices. They had taken a species known for being adaptable and aggressive, given them a common enemy, and forced them to become completely self-sufficient. They had turned traitors and diplomats into the most effective military force the galaxy had ever seen. Most importantly, they had made the mistake of believing their own propaganda about human weakness. Communications from Centralis Prime, his officer announced. The Council is requesting immediate peace negotiations. Tell them, Wells said slowly, that we will negotiate when they are in a position to offer us something we want. Currently, all they can offer is their surrender. He turned to his staff with an expression that would have terrified the Council members who had sentenced humanity to exile. Prepare the fleet for the next phase. It's time to visit Centralis Prime directly. Yes, sir, his chief of staff replied. Should we inform the Council of our intentions? Oh, I think they'll figure it out when we arrive, Wells said. After all, they wanted us to learn our place in their ordered galaxy. I think it's time we showed them exactly what place we've decided to take. The signing ceremony took place aboard the TFS Defiance, humanity's newest and most powerful dreadnought, in orbit above Centralis Prime. The planet that had once been the shining heart of galactic civilization now hung beneath human guns like a jewel in a predator's grasp. President Sarah Chen, now 73 years old but still sharp as a blade, watched as representatives from 2,847 different species filed into the ship's massive conference chamber. Each delegate wore the expression of someone attending their own funeral. She remembered many of these faces from her trial 28 years ago. Councillor Threeks of the Altani Collective, his metallic skin now dulled with defeat. The ethereal Vorthak Prime Speaker, its light flickering weakly like a dying star. Even Councillor Wathex of the Cleith Dominion was present, though his species no longer had much of a dominion to speak of. Distinguished delegates, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. Thank you for accepting our invitation to discuss the future of galactic civilization. Invitation. That was a polite way of saying surrender or be destroyed. The war had lasted only 3 years, but those 3 years had reshaped the galaxy in ways that 50,000 years of Council rule had never managed. Admiral Wells stood beside her, his uniform bearing the insignia of the Terran Federation Navy. Behind him, through the chamber's massive windows, the assembled human fleet stretched into infinity. Over 10,000 ships of every class, from nimble destroyers to massive carriers, all bearing the simple but threatening design philosophy that had emerged from humanity's exile. The terms of the Treaty of Terran Ascendancy are simple, Sarah continued, activating a holographic display that showed the new galactic map. Red zones marked territories now under direct human control. Yellow areas indicated species under human protection. Only small patches of green remained for the old Council territories. First, full recognition of Terran sovereignty over all captured systems and any future territorial acquisitions. Second, immediate lifting of all trade and communication restrictions that were imposed during the exile. Third, establishment of the new Galactic Assembly, with humanity holding permanent oversight authority over all interspecies disputes. The delegates sat in stunned silence. These weren't peace terms. This was a complete restructuring of galactic civilization with humanity at the top. Councillor Threeks finally found his voice. President Chen, surely you cannot expect us to simply hand over control of the galaxy. The Council has maintained order for 50,000 years. Sarah smiled, and it wasn't a friendly expression. Order? Is that what you call it when the Cleith were allowed to raid outer colonies for centuries? When the Zhek Consortium enslaved entire populations while you looked the other way? When species like mine were exiled for the crime of defending themselves? She gestured to the tactical display showing recent battle sites. Your order was built on the suffering of anyone too weak to resist and too far from Centralis Prime to matter. That ends now. The Vorthak Prime speaker's light pulsed with what Sarah's translator identified as desperation. Humanity cannot govern the galaxy. You lack the wisdom, the experience. We lack the corruption, Admiral Wells interrupted. We lack the complacency. We lack the willingness to sacrifice innocent lives for the sake of maintaining an unjust status quo. President Chen nodded to her aide, who activated another display. This one showed economic and social statistics from the territories humanity had captured during the war. In the 3 years since human forces began liberating Council space, piracy has dropped by 97%. Slavery has been completely eliminated in our territories. Trade disputes that the Council had been managing for decades have been resolved. Colonial worlds that were paying tribute to raiders are now prospering under our protection. Councillor Wythex's mandibles clicked with what might have been amusement or desperation. You speak of liberation, but you conquered these territories through violence. How does that make you different from the raiders you claim to oppose? Sarah turned to face the Cleith representative directly. The difference, Councillor, is that we stopped. When the Cleith raided Harvest Colony, they burned everything and everyone. When we took your worlds, we targeted only military installations and left civilian populations unharmed. When pirates demanded tribute forever, we eliminated the threat permanently. She paused, letting that sink in. The difference is that our violence has a purpose beyond causing suffering. We fight to protect, not to prey. Admiral Wells stepped forward. The Council had half a century to solve these problems through diplomacy and proper enforcement. Instead, you chose to exile the one species that was actually fighting back against the predators. You created this situation. The truth of that statement hung in the air like a physical weight. Everyone in the chamber knew it was accurate. The Council's policy of managing threats rather than eliminating them had created a galaxy where the strong preyed on the weak with impunity. Some of you fought beside us, Sarah continued, looking toward a section of delegates whose species had joined humanity during the war. The Krell understood that strength could be used to protect rather than exploit. The Meridian Collective chose cooperation over subjugation. They are now equal partners in the new order we're building. It was true. Not every species had fought against humanity. Some had seen which way the stellar winds were blowing and chosen to ally themselves with the emerging power. Others had simply been so oppressed by the Council's system that any change seemed preferable. The Krell delegate, a massive warrior-caste alien with scars across his chitinous hide, stood to speak. The humans fight with honor. They keep their word. They protect the weak and punish the predators. This is how the galaxy should be ruled. President Chen smiled genuinely for the first time during the ceremony. Thank you, War Leader Krex. Your people's courage during the siege of Vega Station will not be forgotten. She turned back to the larger assembly. This is not conquest for its own sake. This is the establishment of an order based on justice rather than convenience. Those who choose to join us willingly will find themselves as partners in building something better. Those who resist will find themselves on the wrong side of history. Councillor Threix looked around the chamber at his fellow delegates, seeing defeat in every face. And if we refuse to sign this treaty? Admiral Wells answered before President Chen could speak. Then you return to your homeworlds and explain to your people why you chose pride over survival. Our fleets will continue their advance, and next time we meet, it will be to discuss terms of unconditional surrender rather than negotiated partnership. The threat was delivered calmly, without emotion, which somehow made it more terrifying than any amount of shouting would have been. The choice is yours, Sarah said, but choose quickly. The galaxy is changing whether you participate or not. The question is whether your species will be part of that change or a casualty of it. One by one, the delegates began signing the treaty. Some did so eagerly, representing species that had suffered under the old order. Others signed reluctantly, knowing they had no real choice. A few signed with obvious anger, but they signed nonetheless. The Vorthak Prime Speaker was among the last to approach the signing platform. This is not over, it said as its energy signature was recorded on the treaty. Empires rise and fall. Humanity will not rule forever. You're right, Sarah agreed. Nothing lasts forever. But while we do rule, we will do it better than you did. That's a promise. As the last signature was recorded, President Chen looked out at the fleet surrounding them, ships that had been forged in the fires of exile and tempered by decades of warfare against impossible odds. crews that had learned to see the galaxy as it really was, rather than as they wished it to be. The ceremony was over, but the real work was just beginning. Humanity now controlled the largest territory in galactic history, home to trillions of beings from thousands of different species. Some would welcome human rule, others would resist. All would learn that the exiled species they had dismissed as primitive had become something the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral Wells joined her at the observation window as the delegates filed out to return to their homeworlds with the news of their defeat. "Any regrets?" he asked. Sarah considered the question seriously. 28 years ago, she had stood in a crystal chamber and watched the Galactic Council sentence her people to exile. She had failed to save humanity from banishment to the Dark Rim. Now she stood on a human ship above the Council's former capital, having just accepted the surrender of every major power in the galaxy. "None at all," she said finally. "The Council called us dangerous." They were right. But they never understood that the galaxy needed something dangerous to shake it out of its complacent sleep. She looked out at Centralis Prime one more time. Tomorrow, the first human administrators would arrive to begin implementing the new order. The planet that had once been the seat of galactic government would now be just another world in the Terran Federation. "The exile was supposed to be our punishment," she said quietly. "Instead, it became our education. The Council taught us what we needed to become to survive in a hostile galaxy. Now we're going to teach the rest of the galaxy what they need to become to survive under us."